So I think one of the things about Trump Trump has no principles when it comes to policy.
Right.
He doesn't care about policy. He doesn't care about government function. He is very transactional. Everything with Trump is transactional. If you find a way to, you find a way to give him something, put some money in his pocket, name something after him, you are his friend. And we see companies, we see countries, FIFA creates a peace prize for him, because again, they know he's very transactional. You talked about the pardon for the was the Honduras president who was convicted of selling all the, yeah, he paid money and he got a pardon. So I mean, again, and people know that if you give him money, things go your way.
This is The Quiet Loud, and I'm DeAntony Collins. Tonight, we're grounding national headlines in real impact right here in North Carolina, and you can think about how that affects you at home. And to do that, I'm joined by attorney, former NC House candidate, Raleigh native, and personal friend of mine, Antoine Marshall. Antoine, I really appreciate you being here, my friend.
Not a problem. Thank you for the invite, DeAntony. I always appreciate, spreading information.
Yeah, man. I'm so glad you could be here. It's been a long time coming. For those of you that don't know, Antoine and I have been friends for a number of years now.
It's been about a decade at this point.
Yeah, about a decade. You want to talk to people a little bit about how we know each other?
Mainly through Raleigh politics. I remember when DeAntony ran for city of Raleigh, city council here in Raleigh. I ran for state house a couple of times myself. We had both been involved with the Wake County Democratic Party. I know I was third vice chair. You were second vice chair at one point.
I came in as the communications chair, third vice chair, and then I moved over, same one as you, and then I moved over into the municipal vice chair, Raleigh vice chair.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And African American caucus as well.
Yeah, African American caucus, where it was probably one of the only places where somebody saw me and didn't go, Antoine.
Yep.
Or saw you.
I say they confused us. They confused us for each other for a long time.
Right. And I think when you have two folks who are young and who are, kind of invested in what's going on, and people in politics, people see you, but they don't spend a lot of time with you unless you're working with those folks. So a lot of times you seeing people for a few minutes at a time. So they go, okay, that's the dude. You're that guy, right? And most times I'm just like, yeah.
You build a lot of
it's good for me,
but it's never a deep relationship.
Right. But you know what? I also get to cosplay a lawyer every once in a while. So not giving legal advice, but I get to feel as if I've got my law degree.
There's nothing special about it, so.
I endeavor to differ with you on that. So before we jump in, if you could just talk to us a little bit about your path into law and what really induced you to, spend so much of your life and time in public service.
Ooh. So I actually went to college. I went to Claflin University, HBCU in South Carolina. And then I went there to be a doctor. I started my education off as a biotechnology major. I had a chance to intern with Congressman Clyburn in D.C. I fell in love with politics. I had another opportunity to go back to D.C. with Congresswoman Donna Christensen. She was a delegate from the Virgin Islands.
Yes.
And I kind of decided that that's what I wanted to do in my career. So I changed my major second semester of my senior year. I don't advise that for anybody, but changed my major, decided I was going to law school. I graduated from Claflin in 2009. There weren't any jobs out there, so I knew I was going back to school anyways. I said, most people in politics are lawyers. I think it's going to prepare me for it. And that's how I ended up in law school. So I went to Wake Forest Law, and then after I graduated, I moved back to Raleigh. I'm from Raleigh originally. I've been here since I was 10 years old. And so after I graduated from law school, came back home, started working with Legal Aid of North Carolina. And then when I ran for office myself for State House, I left Legal Aid in order to start my own law firm. And currently, I'm the manager of the Wake County Legal Support Center. So I just started that in January and got a couple of exciting projects with that.
Yeah, man, I will tell you, as a community guy myself, and someone I wasn't raised in Raleigh, but I came here as fast as I could as a college student, and I stayed here, made my family here. Same deal. I come from a family that really cares a lot about community, and it has kind of informed my path. And I think knowing you and meeting members of your family, I kind of see that same spark in you and you walk that walk, man. I mean, a lot of people, they get that expensive law degree and they're like, hey, I'm
Right,
about
yeah,
to,
make some money.
you know, right. And you have really put, action behind your words and went out there and really have been walking the walk this whole time. I can tell you this, I didn't mention it before, but Antoine is something of a digital media creator as well. He takes these really big and important news bits that are out there and then he makes them really digestible and in a way that people can take them and understand them and then even find a little bit of levity inside of them. So just marrying what you said about your new job and your digital content creation, I saw recently that there was this mail scam that was going on
Yeah,
that came across your desk and had a lot of people coming, from counties away
yeah.
to address an issue that wasn't real. So, do you find that having this kind of inclination toward social media and content creation kind of helps you educate the community as well?
It gives me the resources to reach out. I think, obviously, being attached to social media, I think one of the best things about social media is depending on how you set up your algorithm and how you set up your timeline, you can get a lot of information in. So I actually never got the text message that was going out there telling people they had a traffic ticket or a parking
Me
ticket
either.
that they had to
Thank
pay.
goodness.
Yeah, so I didn't actually get the message, but I saw other people talking about it. Then I was like, "Oh," and then so when it actually did show up and, like I said, I managed Wake County Legal Support Center down at the courthouse, and when people started coming in, saying, "Oh, I received this," I knew where it came from. And I mean, as far as just kind of, again, part of it is just my background and my training, and then part of just knowing the system and how it works. As far, as soon as I saw it, I was like, "That's a scam," because I looked at the signature. I'm like, Paul Lopez is in the Wake County Clerk of Court. I'm looking at the judge. I'm like, Michael Rodriguez there's no judge in Wake County, Michael Rodriguez. That's not how we cite cases in North Carolina. So I mean, I picked up all of those things
Right.
pretty quickly. Whereas if
Yeah.
you don't have familiarity with the court system, or who the clerk of court is, or who a district court judge, a lot of times people kind of miss over those things. I saw that immediately and was like, yeah, this isn't.
Yeah. And you want to call BS on it, but at the same time, it's like this could be legal. I don't
Yeah,
want
oh yeah,
a bench warrant out on me for something like this. And, I saw your post. It was like somebody took off time. They came from Charlotte. They
yeah.
drove in, you know.
Somebody showed up
So
at nine
those things
o'clock.
can be very scary. So it's good that somebody like you can say, hey, these are the parts of this thing that tell me that this is not real. These are the things that you can look for, moving forward to let you know that you're not looking for something that you're looking for something that these tales that let you know that this thing is not legit. And that's precisely why I wanted you here
Yeah,
because you understand the system. You understand what's going on inside it. You understand the players and the policy. And so with that being said, let's kind of jump into the legislative a little bit. I have been watching this DHS shutdown and funding thing for a while, and I gotta tell you, it's really making my head hurt a little bit because I finally thought that we were getting to something with some bipartisan support, right? I saw Senator Kennedy stepping up and saying, "Well, we're trying to do this thing where we are just doing a clean bill on DHS, right? And we're gonna
mhm.
fund DHS, and then." He said this part, the really dastardly split strategy piece of it to me that said, well, then we'll do the ICE part through reconciliation. That to me, so what how does that even work from a legal standpoint? I mean, what does that say to you and how does that work if you need 60 votes to get this part through, but then you can push this other piece of it through
You reckon?
with only 50 plus 1? How does that even work? I don't understand that.
So I guess first, how we got here, we got to back up a little bit to figure out how we
Okay.
how we got to
All
this
right.
point. So, number one, obviously, the way that Donald Trump is using ICE is different than any other
Right.
previous president. The amount
Like
of
a
money
personal
that they've
army
given
almost.
ICE, yeah. I mean, they basically, if you
Yeah.
just take ICE's funding, it is the ninth largest army in the
My
world.
God.
Like
Right.
just ICE's funding. So they've gotten a lot of money. And then you look at the leadership of the now resigned Christy Nome, or now
Right.
replaced Christy Nome.
Right.
And there was a lot of financial mismanagement there. There was a lot of conversation about, a $200 million ad campaign where she like featured herself. The contracts went directly to like people that she knew when she
Somebody
was
who
younger.
was attached to her from the old days, right?
Yeah, there's still issues of Corey Lewandowski, who couldn't get a job in the Trump administration because they were like, he worked in the first Trump administration. He
Right.
has some issues. They like, he's a little corrupt. We're not even bringing him into the second administration, but him and Christie had their own thing going, and just very, very corrupt politics going on, where they had a policy in place where any funding over $100,000 had to go across her desk, and she had to physically sign it.
Right, right.
And Corey Lewandowski was saying, they were saying that he wasn't an employee of DHS and he wasn't getting paid by
Mhm.
DHS. But now, of
Mhm.
course, coming out that he was basically accepting bribes. Hey, you give me money and I'm going to make sure that this bill gets signed, and they're not going to
Right.
delay any funding. So there's a
Right.
lot of corrupt, and, she ended up getting fired and terminated. A lot of the Democrats, number one, ICE just got this huge budget increase. They were doing things in Minneapolis that a lot of people were upset about. You had the killing of Alex Preddy, and I forgot the other
Megan
woman's
Good.
name.
I mean, Megan Good.
Megan Good. Thank you. Yeah,
Nicole Good. Excuse me,
thank you.
guys.
I knew
Megan
it
Good
was
is still
good.
alive
Yeah,
and well.
yes. But so you had the two shootings. You had a lot of frustration with ICE, and so Democrats took the position that we're not funding ICE unless you put these provisions in place. Body cameras, they can't wear masks, they got to identify themselves, they got to have name tags, really the, fundamental stuff as far as, making sure that they're accountable. And that's kind of where the DHS piece of it gets tied up. And, TSA is part of DHS, so they weren't getting paychecks. And the partial government shutdown is mainly because DHS is not being funded. Um, they're trying to get the bill in place in order to, fund the department, DHS department. But in addition to that, you throw another monkey wrench in the system where Trump is trying to get them to pass the SAVE Act. And he is trying to use this DHS funding as leverage to passing the SAVE Act. And, basically saying, I'm not signing any bill unless you sign. I don't care if you do come back with DHS funding and you do pass a clean resolution for it. I still want to get this SAVE Act passed. I'm not signing anything until you. Now, whether or not he's going to hold up to that, I don't know. But that's also part of things he's trying to negotiate for, even outside of just straight DHS funding. But as far as what you talked about, as far as the reconciliation process, so the reconciliation process, and this is something that I've seen a lot of like progressives and liberals get on the Democratic Party about, saying, well, why didn't you all pass these things under reconciliation if Republicans? Reconciliation is only for funding. It's only for bills involving spending. So a lot of the things that people wanted to see Democrats do under reconciliation, doing voting changes, protect voting rights laws, police accountability provisions that they wanted to put in. You can't do that under reconciliation, so it's got to be tied to funding. And so it's a process where they would go in there and they would place, how much they're going to be able to increase the budget by. There are kind of some preset rules about what can go into and how much you can increase the deficit. And then you can go in and try to pass a funding bill that only requires 51 votes or 50 votes and a tiebreaker. So right now, I don't necessarily, I think I think the Senate went on recess for the next 2 weeks.
Right.
Oh, they try to pass something, and then go on recess for the next 2 weeks. The House is weighing that measure, and so I don't even know if the House is going to take it up or vote. If they don't vote for it cleanly, then now they've got to go back and talk about the difference between the two bills before they
Yeah.
kind of pass a final version.
Which is going to be dead on arrival in the Senate, right? I mean, they've all but said as much in a bipartisan fashion as well. So, is that strategy on the on the part of Mike Johnson and the House Republicans, or is this just straight up avoiding accountability, abdicating their duty?
It's abdicating their duty. The whole when you get into shutdown politics, the whole thing of shutdown politics is who's to blame. Like, can we blame the other side? The public, everybody loses. The public loses because we've got these vital agencies that are closed down, people not getting paid, TSA workers, they miss their second paychecks. So nobody wins a shutdown, at least not us as taxpayers or as citizens. But the argument is who's to blame. The side that feels the most political pressure ends up being the one who ends up, quote unquote, losing in a shutdown.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think right now the problem is that the Republicans don't have much leadership outside of Trump. Everything is guided
Okay.
up to Trump, and I don't think Trump is Trump, in my opinion, is not savvy enough to understand the political process or the legislative process.
Right. Right. He's just a bull in a china shop. He
Exactly,
sees things he wants and he goes for it. And, everybody else is supposed to bend in order for him to get it. I totally agree. Yeah.
and I think you see it a lot when CEOs or businessmen try to get into politics. A lot of them get really frustrated about how slow the process moves because it's a very deliberate
Especially if
process.
you're someone like Trump who didn't have to deal with a board.
Board of directors, yeah.
He was the
Mhm.
president, CEO, my word is what goes.
Yep.
So he never had to deal with any shareholders or board of directors, like you were saying, or something like that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I believe that if you come from a place where you are wielding absolute power inside of your organization, then you believe that if I've done it here, then I'm
You
a
can do
quote
whatever.
executive here as well, then I should be able to have exactly what I want, which is what we're seeing more of, this boldness in the second term to say, I want exactly what I want, and I want only the people who I know will try to get that for me working around me.
And you saw him in the first term try to do that, but he
He
was
did.
stopped he was stopped by a lot of government employees and government workers because the system is not designed for one person to go in there and say, "Okay, we're gonna do this, this, and this." No, there's still a process. You still gotta go through Congress. You got a consensus build in Congress. You got federal employees who have their own kinda independent autonomy to make sure that they're getting the job done. So coming in now, it's like, oh, as you said, we're going to replace it with people who I know will do the job, and we'll get out the government employees, and we'll make it as frustrating as possible for them to operate. We're going to go around Congress whenever possible. And Mike Johnson and the Republicans in Congress, they're just letting it happen because, I mean, they don't want to confront Trump. And so they're just kind of going along with everything he says.
Right. But as you
He,
said, there's no leadership on tap. So what the hell happens when this guy is gone and there is no command structure?
that's,
I mean, they're going to be in the wilderness. I mean, they're already positioning themselves to be in the wilderness either way. But
I mean,
this is
it's
going to
essentially,
be, these next couple of years are going to be, I think, pure savagery inside of the Republican Party.
well, there's already the internal fight as far as replacing Trump.
Right.
You know,
And I
I
see
think
Vance is sharpening his knives in the background, it seems.
he is, but the interesting thing is that a lot of the big time Republican donors, they're backing Rubio. So you're
I've
gonna see,
seen that as well. So it seems there's some factional things
yeah,
starting to spring up because, and you see, I don't know if this is Mr. Hegseth just trying not to get fired, Christy Nome style, but you see him trying to
oh,
get a
he's getting
little bit
fired.
closer as well. I see it coming. I see it
Yeah,
coming
I was like, I
because
don't
Trump
think,
is already saying, "Oh, Pete loves this. Pete
yeah,
wanted
Pete
this
told us
war.
to go
Pete,
to Iran. I think Pete's,
right?
I think Pete's gone by the
I
end of the
think
month.
he's next. But
Yeah,
I think he feels that, which is why he is I think he's trying to cozy up in the way that Rubio and Vance are already kind of really inner circle. But what I think he is about to fall to the same thing that people like Kristi Noem, that people like Sean Spicer, that people like all the way back to the bit that they thought, yeah, he eats people, but surely he wouldn't eat me.
yep.
As Michael Cohen, who seems to be headed right back on that side of the aisle again, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But,
Proximity to
I
power.
don't understand what people will do for power here makes no sense, which leads me back to, you touched on this, if I can go back for just 1 second, you touched on the Save Act, and if we can layer that on top of what we were talking about before. So you have the Save Act being kind of shoehorned into the DHS funding debate, right? But at the same time, on that same vein, we're seeing reports around election interference that have sprung back up around Elon Musk and the pre-filled absentee ballots that he sent around Georgia, and then we
Mhm.
have the fake elector scheme that was happening there, and in other swing states around the country, and then you see federal involvement of folks like
Aisha
DNI,
Cost.
Tulsi Gabbard, and whatever going in for, in this overnight thing to get election materials. What does that say to you? That,
I mean,
these schemes are coming up, and then you have the Save Act, which is also seeming to try to do a similar thing kind of as an undercurrent. So what is all this saying to you, this movement?
I mean, it all comes back to they are trying to rig the elections in their favor. Now, I say I don't know the full mechanisms on how they're going to do that, but I mean, they've been after voter data from states. Obviously, you mentioned Tulsi Gabbard going down to Georgia and seizing voter data in Minnesota. Hey, we'll pull ICE out if you give us your voter data,
Yeah,
which they don't have nothing to do with each other. But obviously, it's something that Trump's been after. He's been after voter data for a long time. And I don't necessarily know what they plan on doing with it, but it is very
right.
concerning the fact that they're
My
trying
gosh.
to consolidate. And I think one thing about election fraud that people don't realize, I mean, when you think about the logistics, we have a very decentralized election and it's intentional. Each state
Right.
by the
Yeah.
Constitution is supposed to run their own election. Even when you talk about rigging elections and what they talk about, oh, voter fraud, we need voter ID so people can prove who they are at the polls. Just thinking about what it would take in order to steal an election that way. You figure that even in close elections in Pennsylvania, where Trump wins by, 11,000 votes out of 4 million, if you're trying to steal that election, I've got to convince 11,000 people to show up at the polls pretending to be somebody else in order to vote.
Right.
Number one, I need to know 11,000 people who aren't showing up at the polls at all, because obviously that blows cover immediately because, oh, this person has already voted before. We have this crisis of people showing up to vote and saying that they've already voted before. Then I got to get 11,000 people on board to stay silent. I mean,
Right.
about this massive scheme. They got to stay silent about it. In the age of social media, that ain't gonna happen. It's just. And then, now, like I said, I've got to know 11,000 people. Then I got to convince people to show up at the polls to say, "Oh, I'm DeAntony. I'm gonna vote in this election," knowing that I got to know that you're not showing up. I got to know enough information about you to pretend to be you.
Exactly.
If I'm gonna do all that, I can just convince. I'm better off spending my money convincing people to vote for me.
Just
I mean,
actually do the work. Right. Which tells you that they have weak ideas, they have weak
yeah,
candidates, and I think the best thing that they ever did for themselves was to learn how to drive wedges in the rest of us. You know
yeah,
what I
oh
mean?
yeah,
Because that, I feel like, is something we have been trying to clean up for decades. The fact that every 4 years they can come out, especially in our community, they can come out and try to make you feel like some kind of an idiot sheep for voting your own best interests. And the
yeah,
people who, latch on to that, oh, so you're just going to be a rebel stamp for the Democrats. I'm like, hey, it's kind of an easy vote when the other people are like,
yeah.
are you listening to what they're saying? You know what
I
I
was.
mean?
I'll say this. I think, I understand some people, when they
Sure.
get, weary about the process or,
Yeah, sure.
I I understand that. I mean, when you look at the history
Mm-hmm.
of black people in voting and
Yeah.
politicians, getting in and not representing our interests, especially in the black community, I get why there's that level of frustration.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
There's not much of an alternative because you've got to keep showing up to vote because everybody who's in office is there because we elected them. And so if you want to change that process, you've got to get back out there and continue to vote and vote for candidates who
Mm-hmm.
vote in your favor. I mean, I am like I'm a Democrat. We both served in the Democratic Party. I have some
Right.
frustrations with the party myself sometimes.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, as a black man, I represent, when I go in there and I talk about, I want to make sure that I'm representing my community when I go to the table. And
Yeah.
I think my best way I can explain, my confliction is the transportation bill that Biden passed.
Right. Okay.
In
Say
that
more.
bill, there was a provision, it was called Reconnecting Communities Act.
Hmm.
And they said that they were going to put $6 billion because they recognized that the infrastructure they built segregated black communities, where they put highways, what they put bridges.
Mm-hmm.
There's a New York City planner who's famous for lowering the bridges to go to a public
Yep.
beach
Right through.
because city
Mm-hmm.
buses couldn't pass through them from black
Right.
neighborhoods. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, his thing was like, even if we integrate the beaches, I don't care. You're not paying millions of dollars to change that bridge. And so the Reconnecting Communities Act was like, we've identified this, and this is our kind of money to kind of remedy that and try to fix some of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was in the original bill. And then obviously it was a big omnibus bill. It ended up being, trillions of dollars. And so the Republicans pushed back on the costs and they dropped the cost from $6 billion to like 100 million, or it's like 300 million.
Mm-hmm.
And Pete Buttigieg, when he got up there and announced the bill, he talked about the Reconnecting Communities Act. Now, as a Democrat, and as a black, I was happy to have a transportation secretary who understood, hey,
Right.
these
The
things
importance
happen.
of
We
reconnecting,
need to
right.
fix it. But on the other side of it, I'm like, y'all said it needed $6 billion, and as soon as they
And
pushed back on the
we're
cost, you
starting out
immediately,
underfunded.
yeah, you gave us 5% of what you said we needed.
Right.
Can you know? So
Right.
so that's my confliction. I mean, and I know the other side wasn't giving us nothing. So it's kind
Nothing.
of so that is the highlight of how I feel sometimes as as a black voter who is a part of the Democratic Party. Like, they recognize our issues and they
Yes.
fight for it to a certain point. But anytime there's pushback, that's the first thing on the chopping block
Yeah.
becomes our issues. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
that's been my but at the same time, again, we elect everybody who's in office. And so if you don't show up to vote, then you're stuck with other people telling you, how government's going to run, how your tax dollars are going to be spent.
Yeah, man, absolutely, absolutely. And that you just can't say that part enough. But I think the assault on voting is going to change some people's minds, I think, because they're pulling out all the stops to make sure that you can't do
Well,
it.
the
You know what I
interesting thing,
mean? And so hopefully I think that that sense of urgency, that Martin Luther King talked about, that fierce urgency of
you're seeing
now
that.
starts to
Yes.
really kick people to say, hey, if they're trying to tell me this thing doesn't matter at all, why are they working so hard to make
Hard to
sure
stop
I
me from
can't
doing it.
do it? You know what I'm saying?
I think one of the interesting things we might see is this coming back to bite them. Because we've
Mm-hmm.
seen we've seen Republicans try to interfere with elections, and it ends up not working in their favor. So
Right.
I remember the Supreme Court justice race with Mike Morgan.
Right, right,
In
right.
that,
Say more about this. Yeah.
yeah, so in that race, there were a couple of Court of Appeal
This is
judges.
North Carolina Supreme Court,
Yes, North
Mike
Carolina
Morgan.
Supreme Court, Mike Morgan. I think this was 2018, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I
It was 2018, 2020. I can't remember which one.
think that's right. Yeah, yeah.
But we had a Supreme Court race, and what the Republicans had done is that they made the Court of Appeals partisan. Now, before this time, they did not, the judges, they were just on the ballot. They didn't identify them as
Right.
Democrat or Republican. And so they were making the judicial races partisan. They made the Court of Appeal races partisan, but not the Supreme Court race. They eventually went back and did that in a later election, but they made the Court of Appeal races partisan, and they listed the Republican at the top of each ballot. I mean, on the top of each race. So there were like 3 Court of Appeal races. It was like the Republican candidate, Democratic candidate, Republican candidate, Democratic candidate, Republican candidate, Democrat. And then on the Supreme Court race, they flipped them and had
Mm-hmm.
Mike Morgan's name first, and then the Republican guy was second, and then they didn't
Brain games.
identify the Republican and Democrat in that race. And Mike Morgan won by roughly the same margin that all the Republican
Right.
candidates for Court of Appeals
They screwed
won.
themselves, right?
They screwed themselves. And then they tried to do it again with Anita Earls,
Right.
where they had a sitting Republican incumbent, but they didn't have a
Mm-hmm.
Democratic. And so what they did was they allowed a primary race. Oh no, they didn't allow. They allowed anybody to get on the ballot without doing a primary. They basically got rid of the Supreme Court primary,
Right.
and they thought
Mm-hmm.
multiple Democrats were going to run for the seat, which would make it easier for the single Republican to run.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a guy who was he was unaffiliated, but he was kind of affiliated with the Democrats, but he was registered as unaffiliated. He changed his registration to a Republican and announced, and there was only one Democrat who ran. So again, they tried to do something to kind of game the
Uh-huh.
system,
And it cut
and they messed
against them.
themselves up. And what I
Yeah.
see now, what potentially could happen now, is the way that the North Carolina Republicans gerrymandered the North Carolina maps. And so what they did was they made 3 very strong Democratic districts with the idea that the remaining, 10 will be Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to do so, each Republican seat has it goes about 56, 58% Republican from the last Trump election. But what we see is that right now, the Republicans are faring very poorly in all of these races. In upcoming elections, there's a very negative. And what may end up happening, if there's a big enough Democratic wave countrywide, they could lose all those seats. Whereas they would have had a couple of safe seats, in the 60, 65% range, they dropped them all down to 56, 58%. And if there's a big enough
Yeah.
wave,
Yeah.
you might see a lot of them losing,
Yeah,
which
you got
would
to
be
watch out for
good.
that daily double, man. It could take all your,
Exactly.
you know what I mean?
So yeah, so I think, again, they're trying to rig the elections. They're trying to do a lot of these things to try to influence elections and change and kind of rig the game. Which, as you kind of said, it shows proof that their ideas aren't popular. If they were, then they wouldn't be doing all of this stuff. But again, if we keep changing the rules, to try to remain in power, then that's what they're trying to do, and it could end up backfiring against them.
Exactly, man. I'm glad you brought up, Mike Morgan and the Supreme Court race, because I want to talk a little bit about Supreme Court, not in North Carolina, but the U.S. Supreme Court. So SCOTUS just today, we're recording this on Wednesday. So SCOTUS just today started hearing arguments on birthright citizenship. So, just for our folks who aren't in the know, can you talk a little bit about what birthright citizenship is, and then from a constitutional standpoint, and then kind of talk to us a little bit about what's at stake here?
Okay. So birthright citizenship comes from the 14th Amendment, which was one of the post-civil rights bills, the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. And so birthright citizenship comes from the 14th Amendment. It has a number of clauses in it, but the main one we're focusing on is who is a citizen of the United States. And the amendment specifically states all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens.
Full
And
stop.
that basically gave all former slaves citizenship in the United States. But that's the language, all persons born or naturalized in the United States. So basically, the law has been, if you are born here, regardless of where your parents are born or what citizenship your parents have, if you're born in the United States, you are a United States citizen. And so that has been the case. And for a lot of countries in the Western Hemisphere, they have a lot of birthright citizenship. So Republicans will point to like countries like Japan, countries in Europe, where there isn't necessarily birthright citizenship. It is tied to the parents. But in the West, where we had a lot of, migration, most people in the Western Hemisphere came here through migration at some point. A lot of them do have birthright citizenship, where if you were born in the country, you are a citizen of the country. So for a lot of anti-immigrant activists, a lot of conservatives, they don't like that provision because, since 2000 and since the 90s, 2000, you've had a lot of Hispanic immigrants, particularly Mexican people, coming to the country. And then once they have their children are citizens of the United States. So for a lot of anti-immigration, individuals, like getting rid of this was just, is what they're trying to do. Now, I don't necessarily know what their test is beyond birthright citizenship. I think they are trying to tie it back to the citizenship of the parents. And so when Trump came into this, when he was elected in 24, and one of his first provisions in 25 was to do an executive order trying to end birthright citizenship.
Right.
Number one, you can't do that because
Right.
it is a constitutional amendment. It is part of the 14th Amendment. The only way to get around a constitutional amendment is to amend the Constitution again, as we saw during Prohibition. We said alcohol was illegal, then we came back and said, never mind, that was a bad idea. The only way you're going to be able to amend the 14th Amendment, you're not going to be able to do it by law. You're not going to be able to do it by an executive order. You've got to pass another amendment. And so, as you said, they had the Supreme Court hearing for that today. The Solicitor General of the United States, who was Trump's former criminal law attorney,
Yeah, it's doing a
tried to argue the
terrible job.
case. I mean,
I think, well, I will say this. I listened to it and I just, because at first, because I'm not listening to it from a legal perspective. A lot of that stuff is just legalese that I'm like, I'm
mhm.
trying to make something out of it. But listening to what the justices, their line of questioning at first, I'm like, man, at first I'm like, you too, Ketanji Brown Jackson? But then I'm like, wait, I see where you're going. I see where you're going. So after a while, it started to seem as though he was getting the third degree from both sides.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I know, these judgments these rulings don't happen instantaneously. So I know we'll have to wait and see. But what were you going to say?
Yeah. Yeah, we have to wait and see. I'm not going to say he did a terrible job. He has a terrible case. It's a bad argument.
Okay.
I tell
Right.
people, I tell all people all the time, they'll come to the courtroom and be like, oh, I got a lawyer. I'm like, hey, lawyers are like chefs. If you give us prime ingredients, prime fresh meat and vegetables, we can make a meal. If you give us rancid meat and rotting vegetables, there's nothing we can do. Like the best lawyer in the world
Right.
can't argue a bad fact. This is a
Right.
bad case. I mean, look,
I can plate it, but it's still gonna stink. Yeah.
there's nothing. So I'm not gonna say he did a bad job. He's got a bad case. Like this is not a case that, he probably. I'm sure he probably walks in there knowing he's going to lose because again, the 14th Amendment is very clear: all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. I
But
don't
then
know
they're
how much
making the
clear.
case on whether or not it was just for enslaved persons, or
Yeah,
they're talking about stuff like allegiances, which was kind of over my head, but they were talking about, whether you had an established domicile and this, that, and the other. And I'm just like,
I
they're
mean,
going at this thing every which way they can try to get an end to it.
they're trying to throw Jello at the wall, but I mean, again, this has been passed back in 1868. It has been the understanding of all courts since 1868 that obviously they've never had this kind of argument go to the Supreme Court, but this has been the understanding of how this constitutional amendment has worked for since 1868. I mean, at this
Yeah.
point, there's not much of an argument here. And I mean, again, the as you say, you align yourself with Trump aligns himself with people who are willing to go do his bidding. They got to go make this argument, but there's no argument to be made here. And I mean, the justices were letting them have it because again, the Constitution, the history, it's been pretty clear. And I mean, what they're trying to argue is a very, very distorted view that, some people on maybe the deepest crevices of the right wing think tank might think, oh yeah, we can argue this, but it's not feasible. But as you said, I think we're so divided that it is hard to imagine what, would get people on board with amending the Constitution again. I think, they're still trying to pass the equal rights
Right.
for women. I think they're still
Mm-hmm.
one state short of getting that done. And I mean, that's been 40 years they've been trying to get that done.
Right. Yeah.
Because I mean, again, in order to amend the Constitution, you got to get, 3/5 of Congress to vote on something, and then you've got to get 3/5 of the state to ratify it. And I
We
mean,
just
even if
need
you
somebody radical out there, man, to just make this their only thing. We need that man from the Rents Too Damn High party to come out those gloves on and just say
he passed
nothing but,
away.
no, get out of here. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
he passed away.
Man, rest in peace, bro.
I think one of the problems that we have, one of the problems I see that we're having, I mean, obviously there's a lot I think that we need to change
Mm-hmm.
within our governance process. When I ran for state house, one of the things I was looking at is why our government looks the way it does, and trying to figure out ways to change that. I mean, for North Carolina in particular, when I ran in 2018, the most common profession in the General Assembly was retired. And I mean, why? But you look at it and say, why is that? Well, because North Carolina General Assembly, they only want to pay $13,000 a year. And you think about who can afford. I've got kids, you got kids. I mean, I got a mortgage. Yes, who can afford to run? The wealthy and the retired. So, one of the things, even though I was unsuccessful in all my runs, one of the things I was proud of was that I got the State Board of Elections to make a ruling that candidates can use campaign funds for childcare expenses. Because again, I had 3 kids. If I'm going out to meetings every night, I need to hire somebody to watch my kids,
Right.
or else you can't run. So I mean, it's kind of thing. What can we do to balance the playing
Wow,
field to
that's
get people to
amazing.
run? And so when you talk about, I think one of the concerns I see in how our government's functioning now, number one, I mean, again, we've got to do something with campaign finance laws. Because again, when you look at who's in
Yes.
office and why they're in office, I mean, everybody hates Ted Cruz. Everybody. Republican senators hate Ted Cruz. Texans hate Ted Cruz. Everybody hates Ted Cruz, but that man has been in the Senate and he keeps winning. Why? Because again, how our system is structured. When you have unlimited donors, people making, can bankroll, billionaires can bankroll hundreds of millions of dollars of dark money into the system when you can prevent other people and candidates from running. I think all of that goes into who we have in office now. And one of the concerns I see is how we're operating now is that Congress really is very unproductive. They are
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be the branch that passed the laws that govern our country, but under both Trump terms, Congress has just been very, very unproductive. And it's just do this executive order, Trump do this executive order. And, some people, they express frustration that Obama didn't get more done. But one of the things that the Obama administration was very diligent about was put it in legislation.
He worked.
Because
Yes. Yep.
we talk about, obviously, if you can pass a constitutional amendment, it is nearly impossible to get in a
To
constitutional amendment
overturn it,
appeal
right?
because you got to get
Mm-hmm.
3/5 of the vote. You're not getting it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you put it in legislation, you still got to get, a future Congress coming. Okay, can you get 60 votes to overturn it? No? Okay, then it's going to continue to stay in place. And then, when you start doing executive orders are only as strong as the executive is in office. The minute he's replaced, you get another executive order come in and that's what, we saw Biden come in. He repealed a lot of Trump's executive orders. We get Trump come back in and he repealed a lot of Biden's. And we're back in that cycle. Whereas something like the Affordable Care Act, when you look at, the Lilly Ledbetter bill, when you look at the things Obama
Right.
passed, they are very hard to overturn because they were put in legislation. He was he could have moved faster, doing
Mm-hmm.
things by executive order, but it doesn't last as long. And I think that was one of the things when Biden got in office and he wanted to do the student loan forgiveness. And
Right.
everybody
And
kept
he
getting
tried.
on him.
Yeah.
Well, everybody kept getting on him about, it's, 120 days and Biden still does too. And that was coming even from Democrats. And
Man, let me tell you something. One of my best friends in the world was hedging on voting for him altogether because of this. And it's like, we know people who had their thing canceled. He was trying. He was
he
trying.
was trying,
The other people are stopping him from doing it, and you are blaming the guy who's actually trying. Like, I
but
don't get that. But go
the
ahead.
problem I had was even, I saw Elizabeth Warren and AOC, who I love both of them politically, but
Uh-huh.
even they were like, Biden, just do an executive order. And Biden was like, no, Congress, send me a bill. I will sign it. I will advocate for it because if you put it in legislation, it remains. He did an executive order, and what happened? It was
Mm-hmm.
challenged in the courts. Republicans said, you don't have
Mm-hmm.
the authority to do that. They overturned. If it was a bill, it would have stuck. They wouldn't have been able to get turned over. So right now, like I said, we're governing by this cycle of the president does executive orders to try to get things done. They're challenging courts. There'll be the next president comes in and will overturn what those executive orders are. And Congress really just has not been doing its job. Like outside of tax cuts, they've done nothing with that majority.
Got to be right. Yeah, they've been on vacation pretty much so much
Yeah,
of it, in an attempt to not have to face up to what
face
their
up
actual
with that.
responsibilities are,
Exactly.
And that's pretty disgusting if you ask me, because there are people out here whose very lives
Impact.
are depending on you coming in here and gaveling into session and putting these bills up for votes, and whether they go or don't go, do
Mhm.
your job. Get these things going, because if they are downvoted, at least somebody else could potentially try to repackage and come back again. But when you put these things in limbo, you are telling the American citizens that what they care about doesn't matter. It's only what you want to do. And that sucks, man. And you're right. Executive orders are right now have been kind of the bane of political governance right now, because that's the only way that things are happening, is just he's sitting down with a pen, which apparently he's paying too much to Sharpie too. For somebody who knows deals, boy, he spends a lot of our money on nonsense.
On us.
But to wrap up our kind of talk on the judiciary, let's talk a little bit about. Go ahead. You got one more thing.
I just want to jump in and say something. You said something very important. I just want to touch on that.
Yeah,
People's
sure.
lives are in the balance, and
Yeah.
that's why I try to. I am as dedicated and diligent as far as spreading information and making sure people are aware. Because one of the frustrating things I hear is, it doesn't affect me. Well, yes, it does. I mean, it does affect us. People have literally died from the decisions
Yes,
that this
sir.
administration made. Not just the soldiers, in Iran who've been attacked, but I mean when they cut cancer treatment and how many lives has that impacted? When they cut,
Yes.
food safety inspectors, when
Yes.
they cut, when they cut NOAA and the weather
Mm-hmm.
services, and then there was a
Yeah.
tornado that touched down in Oklahoma, and they didn't do the early warning system because they fired the people. People's
Right.
lives are impacted by these decisions, and to me, that's the most frustrating part. Because even when Trump was like, "Oh, we've had bad presidents, we survived bad presidents before." Not all of us, not all of us, and I mean, it's not, and not just Trump. I mean, you think about if Reagan had acted early on HIV/AIDS. You
Yes.
think about, Katrina and the response to Katrina. We think about the number of lives that were lost in Iraq. I mean, you think about all these. People's lives are in the balance from these
Yeah.
decisions. Lives, their income, their finances, like these are very important decisions, which is why, like I said, I stress that people need to be involved and vote.
They
But
do,
I was
because if the other side, if those people don't even see us as people on the same footing as them,
Mhm,
it's almost dehumanizing. People are dying because they don't care
mhm.
enough to do something about what you have going on. And if that doesn't infuriate you enough to step up and show up and do something about it, I don't know how else to convince you.
Yeah.
But like I was saying before, like I was just about to get into, just to close out this last little piece of the judiciary block. Let's talk a little bit about this judge blocking construction of this
The
now
ballroom?
$400 million Vanity Ballroom project. I mean, what the heck, man? Is this thing ever going to be built? And do you think that what does that say about how our courts are functioning right now? I mean, we've seen him lose in court several times. Now, does that mean that he's going to stop construction, or is he gonna honor the ruling, or is he just gonna barrel through a la don't send any more people to El Salvador? Oh, the plane's in the air.
Yeah. Mhm. So, I would jump off and say something very controversial, but
Okay.
I plan on being proven right. I I think Trump's got about 2 months left to live.
Bro, I said this. Oh my God,
I
bro. I
I've been
said this to Kelly. Kelly's my wife, y'all. I
mm,
said this to Kelly not maybe a month or so ago. I said what we're looking at, I think, is somebody is not long for this world, and he is trying to. You go ahead, though. You go ahead. Oh my
so I've
God. You
I've
go ahead.
I've been saying it I've been saying that since Thanksgiving. I've been saying he's not gonna be around in May, and I really think that that's going to be the time frame, and 'cause he's got dementia, and he's got a very specific type of dementia, and they just won't tell us, but he's exhibiting
They
all the
won't tell us.
symptoms.
Yes, sir. Uh huh.
I think the ballroom is kind of one of those vanity projects that they gave him to keep his mind occupied on something that he enjoys,
Mm-hmm.
which is,
Mm-hmm.
Construction, real estate,
Cause he can talk
building.
to you all about the drapes and the marble
Mhm.
and the floors, and but
We
if you
just
ask him what's going on with something in the world, somebody
nothing.
told me, right?
So I think that is a project that they just kind of gave him to keep him occupied, while they kind of deal with all this other stuff that he's doing outside. So that I think in my mind, that's the entire ballroom right there. Is that they're giving him a vanity project to focus on so that he doesn't have to focus on all these other things because that he's screwing
Yeah.
up.
Mary Trump said that who is his niece said that is what they did with his father,
His
Fred
father.
Trump,
Yeah,
in his waning days of his dementia as well. They gave him a project that he could do,
he
something
could
he
do.
could focus his mind on that made him feel like he was still a part of what was going on while somebody else was running the business itself. Man, that is scary that you said that, because I have been saying that for some
But
time
yeah,
now, that I do not think this man is long for this world, and I think in certain and subtle ways, he tells us.
well, he tells.
When he
I mean, what,
says stuff like, I don't think I'm going to
going to
heaven, or I'm
heaven?
trying to
Yep.
get into heaven, this, that, and the other, why's your mind suddenly going to this? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? When somebody like him before always carried on as if he was invincible and was going to live forever. Remember, he had huh, Doc Ronnie, as he likes to
Yep.
call him, said the man was going to
The
live 200
healthiest
years or
president in the
something like this.
world.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, come on,
Yeah.
300
Yeah.
pounds, you know, eats hamburgers 3 times a day, but he gonna live to be 200 years old. But yeah, I think, man, we are in agreement on that. I think that he is trying to run up the score. I think that's why there's a lot of legacy building. There's a lot of wanting to put his name on things. I'll do it if you name something
Name it
after me.
after
I'll
me.
do it if you put you know what I'm saying? I think all of that is a pharaoh or faux pharaoh trying to leave a pyramid behind. And
Exactly.
I think it's disgusting, but if that's keeping his worst inclinations at bay, like, should he have even worse inclinations than he has
No,
currently shown us right now?
it's still leading us down a bad path because he's not focusing on the
For
things that he
sure.
needs to focus on. But
Well, I mean, absolutely.
to go
Yeah,
back
but go
to
ahead, dig into that.
to go back to your question and answer the question that you asked about one of the things about the American judicial system, it works slow. I mean, it's just part of the process that it works slow. Obviously, they tore down the east wing of the White House how long ago, and this case is just making its way. They filed the case as soon as it was, he started doing the demolition, and obviously, this is kind of where it's at.
Right.
It's not gonna be built anytime soon. He keeps coming out with these artist drawings. Oh, this is what it's gonna look like. And I think it was the New York Times. They kind of went through some of the artist renderings, and they found like staircases that led to nowhere, and just like they're like, this is not feasible. They talked to a number of architects saying, the size of what they're trying to build isn't, the land. There's not enough land for them to build what they're trying to build, and there's just not enough space for them to build what they're trying to build. And so the artist renderings, like I said, have a whole bunch of issues in it. So I don't, like I said, it's not feasible. Like I
Is
said, I
the
think it's a
bunker
project.
the point?
I think the bunker's the point. I mean, I think the bunker's the point. There's obviously yeah. I think the bunker's the main thing that they're trying to do. In addition to, I guess, like I say, keep Trump
Yeah, I mean,
occupied.
because yesterday I want to say I heard him talking about it, and he basically referred to the ballroom as a shed to the bunker that would be underneath. So,
And
I mean, that sounds to me like you don't even really care about what's going to be on top of this thing,
I'm
because what's being housed underneath is going to be your means of not getting ousted from your position should he live to the end of his term, which I don't see.
I'm gonna just throw out there that there was a certain mustache man in the '90s who did the exact same thing and built a bunker underneath the ballroom. So the parallels are
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I don't think he has the balls for the cyanide though, but
But I think the
I
other
don't
thing.
think so.
The other thing that they keep throwing out there, and there's a lot of things that the average person, when they hear about it, they think, "Oh, that's a great idea," and then it's like when you're actually involved in it, and the system, like that's a terrible idea. And one of the things they keep talking about with this ballroom is, "Oh yeah, it's private funded, like it's no taxpayer money." That's not a
That's
good
the worst
idea
thing. No,
because
no.
them
You don't
billionaires and
want
those
private
companies who are,
enterprise and companies and
yeah,
countries
they're
having
donating
pieces
hundreds of
of
millions of dollars for a reason. They're not doing it out of the kind of stuff. You have just allowed bribery to happen. And I mean, that's why we have federal law. I mean, and so same thing when Elon Musk came out there, it was like, Elon Musk came out and offered, I'm going to pay the TSA agents. And then, obviously the government shot him down and he's like, oh, I would. But I think number one, Elon knew that they weren't going to accept that money because it's not legal. And the reason why it's not legal is because you don't want private people giving the government money because it's a bribe. Like, it makes bribery so easy at that point. They are not donating $400 million for a ballroom just because they love America and love Trump. They are getting something out of it.
absolutely.
Oh yeah, it's not taxpayer. No, if it's for the public benefit and it is use my taxpayer dollars. I pay plenty in
Exactly.
taxes. Use those dollars
We
for
build
the
the
public.
roads and bridges and trains and
Exactly.
everything else. Yeah.
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 So I mean,
We
because
don't
then
go
you
to Saudi Arabia and say build us a such and such. No.
But then you make it for the public function. And I mean, that's something else that I see a lot of issues when we have, CEOs and businessmen get in there and say, we're going to treat government like a business. And I'm like, that's not a good idea because it's not a business. It's government. It's designed to serve the public. And I think the best example I can give of that is mail service. They have been trying to privatize the postal service for a long time. Oh yeah, UPS can do it, FedEx can do it. There are some parts in rural America that UPS and FedEx don't deliver to. They contract with the postal service for final mile delivery. Why? Because the routes aren't profitable. So if you say treat government like a business, you're basically saying don't deliver mail to those areas because we can't make money off it. That's not how government. Everybody should be able to get their mail. If we believe that that's a truth and that the government should be funding that, that's why the postal service exists. That's why we can't privatize it. And there are just so many examples of that where we do things not because it, saves us money or it's because it's profitable. We do it because it serves the public good. And again, when you start having businesses and corporations get to this, fund these things, they're going to make decisions in their best interest and not in the interest of the public good. And so if that ballroom is worth it and we need to revamp and put money into building that ballroom, use taxpayer dollars, go through the appropriation process, let Congress vote on it. And then as voters, we can sit around Congress and say, nah, you spent my money wrong. We're voting you out. But if you accept money from, Elon Musk and all the other people to build something that is not in our best interest, we've got no recourse other than say,
Yeah.
yo, like, hey, and then hey, it's not your money that's doing all this stuff. It's private, but it's still not serving our interests. And so, when Obama was in office and they had to rehab the White House and they put $300 million in, rehabbing the water systems, electric, and
Right.
cool.
And that's
We
just
could,
bringing it up to code. Right.
Yeah, do that. We're okay with that as a public because we need the White House to at least function there. You're not going
Mm-hmm.
to get, if Congress can't pass the money to fund this ballroom, it doesn't need to be built.
Right.
And, like the
100%.
idea that we're going to let private citizens come in and do it, that's not a good idea.
It's terrible. It's terrible, man. Oh my gosh. That's so crazy. So let's turn a little bit to executive power since we're talking about this would be Mad King here. So I mentioned earlier that we had, troops from here, from our very own Aiken Airborne, headed over to some portion somewhere in the region of the Middle East. And now we hear that there could be talk of, we hear Trump talking about potentially abandoning the Strait of Hormuz. So all that saber rattling for nothing, all of that troop positioning for nothing. What's going on here, man? What concerns do you have about how this is being handled legally, globally? I mean, can we even continue this escalation without clear congressional authority? I mean, what are we doing?
So I think number one, we've seen a slow removal of Congress's role when it comes to authorizing strikes in military force. And that's not just with the Trump administration. I mean, that's been
Oh yeah,
going back
yeah. Mm-hmm.
to,
Mm-hmm.
been going back to Clinton, Bush, Obama, Biden. So we've seen, and, I think part of it is politically, the reason why the founders said that Congress would declare war is because it is a very, very unpopular decision.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, again, it's kind of one of
And
those things.
expensive.
Yeah, if it's worth doing, if we are sending, American soldiers over there, we want it to be a very deliberate process. We want accountability in that process. We want, if we say, yeah, we're going to gear up and go to war, that the American people are behind that decision, which is why we let Congress do it. And I think, like I said, we've allowed strikes and we've allowed some authorization for use of military force and, you know, uh, outside of a full declaration of war, because America has not declared war since, I want to say it was Korea.
Mm-hmm.
I think Korea was the last declaration of war. And so, I mean, all of these, you know, Vietnam, Iraq, the Gulf War, Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Libya. We've never declared war, in the past 60 years or so. But it has not stopped our military from functioning. And
Well, here's what I'll say, because all of those had some kind of appropriations, though, right, coming from Congress. So in a way, isn't appropriations an authorization of sorts, if you're
it's
willing to
not,
give the
I
money
mean,
toward it?
that's what they're authorizing, but it's not the formal declaration. So they've been giving
I
the
get it. Now that hasn't actually happened here. I know that the Pentagon has asked for 200 billion, but that's what I'm saying. Isn't that kind of a end run around
I mean,
authorization to say, well, if you're giving us the money for it, then you kind of approve it, right?
yeah, I mean that's how they kind of get around. I mean, you think about the post 9/11 bill where they kind of gave Bush and eventually Obama, authority to go after terrorism, but they really didn't define it. And it was kind of like, yeah, as long as you do a limited strike and, you can slide it under that bill. Oh, I'm going after terrorism, which is what they use for Libya. Again, didn't formally approve it. And, it's kind of limited action. If it's under, a certain threshold of time, then it's not necessarily, you can operate without a form. And I mean, to a point, it makes sense. Obviously, the president is commander in chief. If they have to respond immediately to a threat,
Right.
sometimes they don't have
Yeah.
time to wait for
Yeah. I mean, they got
Congress's.
bin Laden. They couldn't come over and say, hey, so we know
I
where
need a
he is.
declaration of, yeah.
Right. You know
I
what
mean,
I
if
mean?
if
So,
we're
I
attacked,
mean, in certain respects, right, we do understand where, strategy involves you shutting the hell up and doing
moving
this
fast.
thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So you got to
Right.
move
I get
fast,
it.
but
Yeah.
any prolonged or, extended, you would like to have Congress's approval. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think with number one, I think Congress has kind of abandoned their duties because I mean a lot of stuff, even when they were bombing ships and the bombing the quote unquote drug boats in, off of the coast of
Venezuela.
Venezuela, it's like,
Yeah.
this is not an authorized use of force. It's a war crime. I mean, that those things kind of just disappeared when they double tapped on the boat and they had
Right.
video footage of the guys clinging to the side of the boat, which is a war crime.
Which
When they
will come
authorized,
back. I won't vote for anybody else who is not going to fully come after him over these things. But go ahead.
yeah, when they went down there and they got Maduro out of office, that's a war
Mm-hmm.
crime. I mean, we went in there and
Mm-hmm.
use military force to remove the president or a sovereign nation
A
for
sovereign
crime
right.
for claiming that he violated U.S. law, but he wasn't in the U.S. when he was. I mean, I was like, what kind of thing is that? Is where we can go to another country and say, oh yeah, you violated U.S. law. I'm not in the U.S. Like,
Meanwhile, pardoning Orban altogether,
yes, exactly.
somebody who we had in custody.
Exactly. So I mean, you have, so I think that's,
Yeah.
but I think number one, the Venezuela strike gave him a big head. The idea, oh, I can do anything I want. Look,
He
I'm more
thought
down there.
that Iran was gonna flip. Yeah.
Yep. And I think also Israel baited him into this. And we know this because they tried to do the same thing with Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Right after the was it October 8th where Iran went in there, or
You're
where
right.
they
Exactly.
in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. The music
So
festival or something or
yeah,
other thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right after that, the Israeli embassy reached out to the U.S. and was saying, "Oh, we've got all this intelligence that Iran's going to strike." And Biden and Anthony Blinken told them, they were saying like, "We need to strike first. We need to do it, a preeminent strike before they strike us." And Biden and Blinken basically told him like, "Hey, we will defend you, but if you start something, like, that's on you. We're not going in there with you on this. With this, there's not enough intelligence that they're going to strike. And again, we will help defend you, but we're not getting involved in a preemptive strike." And I think that they ran that same playbook with Trump, and Trump was just like, okay. And and so they bombed in coordination with Israel. I think number one, it was very, very short-sighted. I don't think that they were fully prepared for what would happen next. And I mean, I think that, and there are a lot of signs, small signs, as far as, what you would do prior to a strike that they didn't do, knowing that they were going to do this. Number one, they didn't secure any travel for any Americans in the Middle East. And so, I mean,
Right.
previously in Libya, like
I was just about to say, everybody was Benghazi. I can't believe you left all that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and so that was just with the embassy, but the American citizens who weren't in the embassy, like the Secretary of State reached out, the embassy, they reached out to
y'all
all
need
American
to try to find y'all way out of here. Yeah,
not find your way out. We're getting you out of here. We have planes.
Well, you're talking about Libya.
I'm talking about Libya. Yeah. Before
I'm talking about now.
yeah. Now it was kind of like,
but go ahead.
Find a commercial plane. It's like, but. So little things like that they didn't prepare the Americans who were in, they didn't tell our allies, Japan, they didn't tell any of our allies that we're going to do this.
What
Those
allies?
things, like, again, we have a coalition for a reason. Like, you're not going to, and Trump just believes that we can just go out there and bully anybody and just have people lined up. Iran's not the place for that. Iran is not, I mean.
And you know what? All of those places that have been war-torn for decades, you can't bully these people.
No.
You're not going to make these people afraid of a missile strike when they're striking each other. They live with, they live in war-torn conditions and we don't. So they're not going to be afraid of this kind of saber rattling. And they have shown that they are not going to be bullied in this way.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, they know, number one, Iran is very much like Afghanistan when it comes to topography. Like, there's a lot of mountains and caves. Like,
very unforgiving,
yeah. So I mean, it's very unforgiving. There are places that we can strike as much as we want. They can find ways to avoid those. And one of the things that Iran's been doing is they're basically going to bleed us dry. Because one of the things that we do in a partnership with Israel is that Iron Dome. So we provide them with missiles, Patriot missiles, that end up being like $8 million a pop in order to
we try to shoot down these drones rockets. With.
I mean, Iran is firing very unsophisticated, $100,000 rockets that we've got to fire an $8 million missile to intercept.
More than one.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, yeah.
They are firing multiple, hey, we're going to fire this.
But I'm saying we're firing more than one just to hit one of their drones. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So, I mean, and we've already got a shortage of Patriot missiles because we've been giving some to Ukraine. So the fact that, again, they entered into this without even knowing what their stockpiles are, that, again, this is background research that if you are going to war, you do before you strike. I don't. We haven't done it. And I think now I figured they feel like they would bomb, they would kill the supreme leader in Iran, and then say, "Oh, we're done." But obviously, that didn't work because Kamadi's son took over, and again, he's not. They're going to continue to strike. They're going to continue to send these cheap rockets out there. We've abandoned all our allies over the course of the time, and so they're not coming to help. No, you started it. You didn't even tell us you were going to do it. And so now you deal with the consequences. And now we're watching, the economy suffer.
Yeah.
And we have no allies. And we've alienated, and they've already said we're not stepping in on this because you kicked the hornet's nest.
So you
So
have just touched on two of my my last questions was kind of about our economy, but it was also about our global alliances and NATO. So I'm gonna see if I can marry both of them together. Because there are so many growing concerns about our weakening kind of NATO relationships and our alliances around the world. So I mean, what happens when alliances like that are continuously destabilized? We can see from the first Trump term, there was already some reticence to come back and try and work with him a second time, even knowing how he was kind of treating them the first time with the trade war and with the kind of talking to people, using the bully pulpit in a way that presidents don't genuinely use it.
what's our ally?
What is that, right? So where does that leave us from your perspective? Where does that leave us when our alliances are kind of destabilized, and now it's America alone, and Trump is now saying that should there even be a NATO? I mean, this doesn't sound like Trump. This sounds like Russia. This sounds
Yeah.
like
I
Putin.
say this
You know?
Putin's ultimate goals was to destabilize NATO. And I mean, NATO has been the most successful military alliance in history of developed nations. And I mean, obviously, writings on the wall. I think it's done irreparable harm to our alliance with NATO. Because I mean, I don't think that even if we, okay, well, we'll just get rid of Trump. Even then, I don't think that we fully recover the trust of our
Yeah.
allies.
Yeah.
Because I mean, again, how do we know that you're not going to elect the next nutcase who's going to go in there and do these things? I mean, there were reports of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden actually doing military preparations in case Trump invaded Greenland.
Try to take
Like,
Greenland, right?
yeah, so I
Yeah.
mean, we have NATO countries creating, military, and that's no small feat. Like you're bringing in high level generals to create military plans on if our ally attacks us. So I think that kind of harm. I don't know if it's going to take a lot in order to rebuild trust along that coalition. And as
Oversight.
you said, I think Russia benefits from this the most. Russia and China, because I mean, the only thing that's keeping China from going into Taiwan is the concern of
Right.
U.S. and NATO.
Hmm.
And I think Russia and obviously is trying to push upon Europe. And the only thing that's really held them at bay was the threat of NATO.
Yeah.
I think
Doesn't
that
it seem like though, these three dudes, these three heads of these nations, you mentioned China, throw them into the fold, China, Russia, and you have Trump just trying to carve up their own little territories. China can take Asia, Russia can have Europe, and then Trump will just try to take the Americas.
America,
You know what I mean? It seems like that's what they're trying to position themselves to do, and that's gross, man.
it is.
That's disgusting. I mean,
It's not going
what do you do about something like that? I mean, I want NATO to survive. So does that mean kick us out until we have then gotten our act together? Because I don't want NATO to dissolve, but can it live without us though? I mean, we have been the main trustee and steward of NATO since its inception. So is there
I
is
think
there?
one of the things that NATO has done is I think NATO has stopped a lot of world wars. Because I think the problem is when you get a lot of similarly sized military force countries and they're all kind of running independently, there's more of an idea that I'm going to fight. I mean, if you think about just kids on the playground, if all the kids are about the same size, they get to disagreement, they're more likely to fight. Now imagine there's a 6'5", 240-pound kid on that playground with them kids, and he says, "Hey, Oh, that's my ball. No, that's my ball. Hey, it's Kid A's ball. Okay, Kid A, you got the ball. Now, I mean, that's essentially what NATO has been.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I think that, again, as the big kid on the playground, now, as far as whether or not we've always used that power and authority wisely and, for the best interest of humanity, I will leave that to other people to decide. But I think ultimately that's what it's done is it's given us the authority to try to stop future violence. But if I've got a bunch of similarly sized countries, shoot, go ahead. I'll take you on. I'll take him on too. I mean, like, but again,
Right.
you see that 6'5", 240-pound kid. Okay, yeah, you got it.
Don't think
Yep.
twice. Yeah.
All right, yeah, this is your ball. Okay, you may not be happy
Good
about it,
point.
but you're gonna give him the ball. You ain't gonna fight over it. So I think
Right.
that has stopped a lot of fights, and a lot of wars in a lot of countries. Just to know if NATO's behind you, or you got the NATO countries behind you, and they're allied with you. All right, let's not pick that fight. And I think, again, as even though the United States has the world's largest military, we, financially, economically, militarily, we are the world superpower.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot do it alone. And I think that's the mindset that Trump and a lot of conservatives and MAGA go into. We're America. We can do whatever we want. Now, without allies, we can't. Because there's just,
Mm-hmm.
again, the world is too large. And I mean, no matter how big we get, the world will remain too large. It will remain too diverse. It will remain, there's so much going on at all times that there's no way that we can sit here and direct what goes on to other countries. And I think conservatives also have this conflicting viewpoint where it's, America first, you all defend yourself and you all do this yourself. Like we're not going to protect anybody. You need to protect yourself. You need to, and then at the same time come in there and say, oh yeah, you also need to do what we say. Well, no, you're not protecting me. I mean, again, kids who live in their parents' house. If I'm under your roof, okay, I listen to you. The minute I move
Mm-hmm.
out and you tell me, okay, well, you need to do this in my house now. Like I'm
Right.
I'm paying my bills. You can't tell me what to
Yeah,
do now.
absolutely. Mm.
So I think that's kind of where we're heading to, and I can't predict how bad it's going to be. But I mean, I think again, without NATO, you're going to see more wars. You're going to start seeing more regional conflicts pop off.
That's a scary time to be in. Yeah, that's a very ominous position that we stand in the world right now, geopolitically. I don't think a lot of people really think about, how precariously we are from one conflict to another, and being able to navigate that and being able to pick up the phone and call a trusted ally and give some context to a situation where otherwise it could be war,
Yeah,
So
sharing
it
intelligence, sharing. I mean,
all of that, which now we seem to be on the outs
mhm.
in terms of all of that, So like I said, it's a very precarious place to be. Now, talking about home a little bit, we know that gas prices are up and rising.
Mhm.
We know, and that's due to what's going on overseas partly. Also, farmers are having to deal with fertilizer shortages and
Mhm.
whatever else. And on top of all of that, you got kind of, Trump messaging, and the markets are going up and down based on what he's saying. Some people might call that market manipulation.
Yeah.
But then we're seeing agencies like the CFPB get weakened, and other organizations are being restructured across different departments, and a lot of that is in thanks to Doge. They messed with a bunch of different departments, the CDC, this, that, and the other. And then to the kick you where you're down part is that they're tapping Vance to lead some sort of fraud task force.
Mhm.
Are we about to see things get even worse in terms of
Mhm.
fraud? Because there's been a kind of an executive grift going on since they
Very much
came
so.
back into office. So, I mean, what are they going to be calling fraud? Because I think we're starting to see that a lot of things comes down to what their definition of stuff is. You know what I mean? What
Well,
Trump's definition of an emergency is, what Trump's definition of fraud is, what Trump's definition of, you know what I'm saying? So what are departmental IGs useless now? I mean, what's going to happen when all these oversight agencies lose power due to being restructured so much?
they've already lost power because I mean, he's gone in and tried to fire a bunch of departmental IGs. I
Right.
think that again, it goes back to the ignorance of the American public to how government works. We got a very
Mm-hmm.
complex government. It takes,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of mechanisms, a lot of moving parts, and then that's just the federal government and the state government and local government. It's a very confusing government to know how everything functions and operates. And even when people were getting in there with Doge and saying, "Oh, they're going to weed out fraud and stuff," that's what the inspector generals do. That's their job. Like half the stuff that Doge, oh, we found this. There was an inspector general report on that. Like we knew this was happening. Like, even when they talked about the social security, and they were saying, "Oh, we have X number of people on the Social Security, who are over 120 years old," and it's like, no, we don't, because there was an Inspector General's report on this. They aren't in the system. The problem is that we don't have accurate records for their death date, and when you're dealing with a data set that large, it just automatically defaults to 120 years old. They're
Mm-hmm.
not collecting any money from Social Security. We know that this data is out there. Yes, we should clean up the data, but they also say cleaning up that data is going to cost us about $20 million, which is why they didn't do it, because they were just like, well, we'll just continue to live with the problem because we know they're not getting money. But again, there was an Inspector General's report that said all of that. And so when they talk, oh yeah, they're going to root out fraud, again, that's the job of the Inspector Generals in each of these departments, is to look into these programs, see if they're function, see
Mm-hmm.
how they operate. And then, like I said, Doge just comes in, oh yeah, we're just going to start cutting things, and find things as fraud that aren't really fraud. So I think one of the things about Trump that Trump has no principles when it comes to policy.
Right.
He doesn't
Agreed.
care about policy. He doesn't care about government function. He is very transactional. Everything with
Mm-hmm.
Trump is transactional.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Something for
find a
something.
way to, yeah,
Yeah.
you find a way to give him something, put some money in his pocket, name something after him, you are his friend. And we see companies, we see countries, FIFA gives him a peace prize, creates a peace prize for him, because again, they know he's very transactional. You talked about the pardon for the was the Honduras president who was convicted of
Right.
selling all the,
Orban. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And the reason why he got, because he paid for it. He paid money and he got a pardon. So I mean, again,
Mm-hmm.
and people know that if you give him money, things go your way. We
Yeah.
saw, when he was
Hell,
suing.
you can just flatter him.
Yeah, I mean, flatter and give him, but when he sued Facebook and about when they kicked him off of Facebook and they settled out of court, they agreed to pay him money, and they knew that it's probably better to pay him this money. They weren't going to lose that case. They have every right to control who's on Facebook and who's not. They can kick you off, and he violated policy. He clearly violated the policy, so they had every right to kick him off. But they settled because they knew we actually have some government contracts. We want to do some things with government regulations. Let's give him this money to shut him up and
Mm-hmm.
keep him off our back. So, I mean, he's a
Right.
very transactional politician. If you find ways to give him money, he will bend the rules in your favor. And I think, again, that's a very dangerous thing, because when you look at the purpose of the government, it is to protect us. It is to protect the citizens. And again, when you have billionaires, you have companies, you have countries who are saying, oh, I know I can leverage this guy just by complimenting him, flattering him, and greasing his pockets a little bit, or greasing the pockets of people in his family, that's what's happening. And I mean, people tied into the Trump administration make a lot of money doing very shady things. I mean, I talked about
Mm-hmm.
Corey Lewandowski basically selling and his access to Christy Nome for
Right.
money, even though he said,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an employee of DHS, I'm just a special advisor. But again, I'm going to company saying, give me money and I'll make sure that your contract gets signed.
Right. Trading
We
on his
saw
name. Yeah.
uh, BlackRock, the defense contractor, recently
Mm-hmm.
came out there and they had somebody who was tied, the broker for Pete Hegseth, the
Right.
broker
Right.
for Secretary of
Yes.
Defense, reached out and tried to make a multi-million-dollar stock buy, to the point
Mm-hmm.
where it flagged the people at BlackRock saying, hey, put a
BlackRock.
flag on that. At BlackRock, they said, yo, we got to put a flag on that because that much money will raise scrutiny. And that was a month before the Iran strike. I mean, we see
Which, go ahead. Go ahead.
with the unregulated gambling that they do with Kaleshi and all that
Thank
other
you.
stuff.
Yeah.
People are putting,
Yeah.
again, people,
Yes.
oh yeah, I'm going to put a big bet that we're going to go into Venezuela. and the week before we do it. And I'm like,
Right.
obviously, this is very obvious
Insider
that people
trading.
know
Come on.
they're insider trading. You talked about market manipulation. It's exactly what they're
Yes.
doing. They are
Yes.
finding ways to make money hand over fist, and they're selling us
Mm-hmm.
out in order to do so. And there just has
Absolutely.
not been enough of a response. I mean, Trump's got a crypto coin that has made him billions of dollars because people are putting money into his crypto coin.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
talked
My
about
God.
with the ballroom. These companies, they are not giving him this money out the kindness of their hearts. They're doing it because they know that there's money to be made on the other side as long as they flatter the president and get government to bend the rules in their favor. They can make a lot
1000.
more than what they're giving him. So, I mean, what it
Man.
looks like, I mean, again, when we start weakening the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, when we start weakening the rules and regulations about, on the FCC or the SEC, because I think the Securities and Exchange Commission, they're talking
Uh-huh.
about removing quarterly reports to was it by 6 month reports,
Right.
half year reports, which
Mm-hmm.
again, as an investor or a member of the public, you use that information in order to protect
Mm-hmm.
your investments. But
Yeah.
now they can kind of game the system. So I think what we see going on again with this Trump administration is that those with money are buying favoritism, they're buying access, they're buying policies that can be slanted in their favor. And it's going to hurt a lot of people without that authority, without the voice, and whose only voice is their vote. And if they don't exercise it, or if they are, if the federal government is able to find a way to keep them from voting and, do the SAVE Act or other ways to restrict their voting, they essentially lose all power to be able to, influence the government to act on their behalf.
Right. Man. My God.
It's bleak.
It is. It is, man. All right. My gosh. So we've covered so much today. We've covered so much. And I want to get your take on one last thing
Mhm.
before I let you go. And so just to have a little bit of levity, let me get your take on the whole Drewski Erica Kirk
So
situation here.
So I think one of the things about the Drewski and Erica, it shows the level of misinformation because a lot of people have come out with these articles. I've seen a lot. Erica Kirk tweeted about Drewski, and Drewski there's an AI video of Drewski saying, "Oh, Erica Kirk's suing me." Neither of them have commented on the video since the video dropped. So anything you see online saying, "Oh, Erica Kirk responded to Drewski," or Drewski said this, it's not true because neither of them have responded. I
Put
think.
that
I
in my
mean, yeah, like, I mean, it's just a proliferation of fake news, and AI is making it worse. I mean, I watch video, I was like, yeah, that's AI. But the fact that so many people believe it and keep sharing this stuff, I'm like, yeah, that's a problem. But I mean, I thought, the skit was brilliant. I think all the people who were upset saying, oh, he's insulting Erica Kirk. I'm like, he didn't mention her name. So the fact that you drew that correlation means he was right. Like, it
right.
just shows that he
Right.
was you just proved his point that he's right. Like, all he said was
Mm-hmm.
conservative women act like. If you started drawing names and being like, oh, that's this person, oh, that's this person, and they just had to be conservative women, you just proved him
Mm-hmm.
right. Like, that's, I mean, like I said, he's done this before where, again, he doesn't have to name names. You know exactly what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, it proves the point. The fact that he doesn't have to name the person, that he doesn't have to say, oh, I'm this person. Again, we all know who it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It means he's on
Yeah.
top of it. I think the funniest thing
Brilliant.
I saw was,
Yeah.
I think somebody went to Grok, Twitter's,
Oh my God. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
who is this? It's like, oh, this is Erica Kirk, the CEO. I was like, that's how you know you done it right.
Oh my God. And they were talking about, yeah, she's fresh off this skit that she did with Drewski. I was like, oh my God. So good. That is sometimes, art just takes life to a whole nother level. And, we talked about this on this other pod that I'm involved in. Room 518 comes out on Mondays, guys. Mondays. But we talked about this, and it's just crazy, man. This guy, I didn't really know who he was before stuff like this started coming out. I think I'd seen him before,
Mm,
but the mega church skit was where I really
yeah,
started
that was a
paying
big one.
attention. And When I tell you, I mean, it's the same thing as with the Erica Kirk thing. He said it all without mentioning anything
Any
specific or
names. Yep.
anyone specific. And the man is masterful.
Yeah.
He's masterful with it.
He's good at his job.
He doing his job, and so I thought it was amazing. I just really wanted to ask you what you thought about it being someone who, has some skill and inclination toward turning a phrase or being able to, get people to look at something through a different lens. So I just wanted to see what you thought about that. And my final question would be, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I guess one thing before I say, it's the trial for Charlie Kirk. They came back and said that the bullet didn't match the gun of Tyler
Yes,
Robinson.
sir. I saw the shooter's gun did not match the bullet.
Yes.
Yes.
I think again there's a lot going on with that trial that I was like, this doesn't make sense. This is kind of shady.
There's so
Yeah,
much
we got
in
these
it
text
that
messages of
says
him admitting everything to his friend. I'm like, that doesn't
right.
even read like,
That says he wanted out and that it looked like it might be done between him and the wife. There's a lot yet to be seen there. I had an old band teacher that used to say a hit dog will holler every time. And so when you hear something that sounds like they're talking about you, a lot of times people respond, even when your name hadn't been called. So I guess we'll see where that goes. But just from your perspective of things that we've been talking about and of the things that did not come up as well, what should people really be paying close attention to right now? Maybe that's not being talked about, or something that is, but is not being really spoken about in the terms that it should be, or with the weight that it should be.
I think people really need to go back and read Project 2025.
Mm.
I think that, again, it was talked about a lot during the election and the Trump administration, and conservatives saying, oh, it's not really Trump's plan and stuff. But if you look at how he's acted in his first year, a lot of the stuff that he's doing can be related back to Project
Straight by the
2025.
book.
I
Yep.
mean, I recently shared something on Facebook where I shared the, what they talk about with TSA. Their plans to privatize TSA. And, I think one of the ways you do that is you make it up to the point where government can't wield it and say, oh, this is terrible. Let's bring this private entity in to do it better. And so, I mean, if you break the system and they say, oh, yeah, we need to, I need a new car. And, say, well, no, you don't. And then I, damage my car. And they say, oh, now I need a new car. Yeah, I think that. So I think a lot of the stuff that's going on, I mean, again, it's in Project 2025. Like, so I think that is a good roadmap to kind of identifying where things are headed. And I mean, I know I talked about a lot of negative things that, my negative perceptions on what's going to happen in the future under this administration. And one of the reasons why I can stay upbeat and kind of laugh about it is because if you see it coming, like it's harder for it to impact if you kind of see it where it's coming and kind of pivot from there. And so, just when, Kristi Noem and her husband came out with, her husband's in the news recently for
Cross-dressing and the picture.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, bro.
But the funny thing was when she had her hearing in front of Congress, her husband was sitting behind her as Congress was grilling her about her affair with Corey Lewandowski. And he was just sitting there, and the entire time I'm blinking, I'm like, yo, man, like, fight back, like something like.
Now we see
Obviously,
why he
there's
wasn't.
something going on in your relationship where your wife is being questioned about an affair with a staffer by a sitting member of Congress, and you are sitting right there behind her, and she's not denying the affair. There's something more in this relationship that we need to. And then when something drops, it's like, I'm not surprised. I mean, like, it's crazy, but I'm not surprised because I saw it coming, because that didn't make sense. Now it does make sense. And so again, when you start seeing, like I said, I try to stay informed. I try to stay involved, watching the news, reading things, and, just a knowledge of how government functions, so that when I see things pop up, it's like, yeah, saw that coming. Like, it's terrible, but I also knew it was coming, which doesn't erase the harm, but it makes it a little bit easier to kind of digest and continue to move on throughout your day. And I mean, I think as African Americans, I mean, we've been hit with bad news for generations of just, and so I mean, we've learned to laugh off a lot of stuff. And so even now, like I said, things have been terrible. The Trump administration has done a lot of negative things, especially to Black people, especially to minorities, to women. And I mean, again, so when you see it coming, it takes the sting off of it. I mean, it doesn't erase the impact, but it does take a lot of the sting off of it. So I mean, again, the more you can stay informed, Again, reading Project 2025, and understanding how government functions, even when these bad things occur, like I said, you can still call it out, recognize how bad it is, but at the same time, like, hey, I know that I need to start preparing to move off my health insurance plan because they're
Absolutely.
gonna jack the prices up over next year. Hey, I know.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go ahead and make sure I get a more fuel efficient vehicle because I already know gas is gonna hit $4, a gallon next
Damn,
month after he does something. So you can kind of prepare yourself a little bit better.
man, my gosh. Whew, you just well, you know what? I do absolutely, absolutely appreciate you coming through and kind of blessing the pod with your expertise and your perspective and helping us break down information because as all of my viewers and listeners know, I love to connect these dots. I love to, really illuminate these things so that people can see what's happening there. Just as you were alluding to before, if you see one shoe here, obviously shoes come in pairs of two. There's something else. You know what I mean?
Mm,
There's another
yeah.
shoe missing here. And so if something is not quite making sense with this one shoe, maybe we should look for the pair, and see what else is going on there, or at least being aware that there is another shoe missing. You know what I mean? And so I just appreciate you for coming through and helping us connect some of these dots and break some of this information down and really analyze the news with me today. And if you're ever up to it, whenever you want to come in, we'll definitely have you back. You are the very first friend of the pod for the Quiet Loud. And hey guys, I think we did it. Anything else you want to say? Where can people find you? And hear what cool stuff you got going on and what you're gonna do next.
So yeah, I said number one, I want to thank you for having me on. I as you know, I love talking about politics, love talking about policy, current events, and if anytime you invite me, I'm there. So yeah, so I appreciate you for that. As far as where people can find me, I mean, I'm Facebook, Instagram, Threads. That's where I generally share information and current events about what's going on with what I see in politics. And like I said, every now and then I'll do a long explainer about a current event on there to try to educate the people and so have them understand a complex legal issue or policy issue a little bit better. But yeah, no, I appreciate it. And like I said, I'm happy to be the first friend of the pod. And again, anytime you send the invite, I'm there, man.
Sweet, man. That's amazing. So we will put all of Antoine's social stuff, the stuff that he wants to be revealed, in the show notes. You'll be able to look down in the description and check that out. And as always, man, I just want you guys to like, subscribe, comment, and share. Join our quiet quorum. We're growing every day. And as always, stay grounded, stay informed, and stay loud quietly. This has been the Quiet Loud. Y'all.